Greetings, everyone, and I hope that everyone is doing the best they can today. I know it's been a really rough week and unexpected day. So today on Mason Dixon Podcast, we are going to be processing what happened the last few days. Before we get into it, I want to remind everyone that the views and opinions expressed here on Mason Dixon Podcast and on Monuments Across Dixie are our own and just our own views, and they do not represent the views and opinions of any other person, group, or organization, especially with free speech under attack. So let's see who's checking in tonight. We might have some of our regulars. The whole basis of this episode and, emergency episode, for lack of a better word, is we're going to really just process what happened with Charlie Kirk and with Iryna Zarutska. So let's start off what happened in North Carolina first, because that's what happened earlier this week. So this lady was on taking public transportation in Charlotte and was stabbed to death. Out in the open, people left her for dead. They didn't want to do nothing. And it's interesting because most people that have taken either a sociology class or have taken any kind of higher education know about cases where this has happened. That happened with, Kitty Genvinos. She was stabbed and people in apartment buildings watched and had a whole bystander effect. You would think with that being common in pretty much all forms of media and talked about to no end in academics, magazines, all that, somebody would have actually stepped in and done something and said, this is wrong. Why is this woman being stabbed? But no. And when you look into the demographics of the offender was Black. And you had people that were commenting on this post, some of the most vulgar things ever, actually racist, but yet the left has done nothing to condemn it. And you have a lot of people on the right that are too afraid to call it out for what it is. It's racism against people that are European. And that is apparently too controversial for a lot of Republicans. So that happened, and it was barely getting news coverage. I don't even want to give them credit, but a popular news outlet, and just use your imagination, they covered the case and they more or less were victim blaming while trying to make the offender look like he was some kind of hero, or rather, oh, poor him, minimizing it, glorifying the killer. He couldn't control what he did. He had schizophrenia. Y'all, I study clinical psychology, and I can tell you that a person with a mental illness, and there's a lot of mental illness out there, somebody with schizophrenia, they are of sound mind. They know what they're doing. And for those that claim, oh, he was delusional, he didn't know what he was doing, poor him, whatnot, they are absolutely out of their minds. And most states, rightfully so, because the insanity defense is an absolute garbage defense, in my professional opinion. The offenders know what they're doing. This person knew that if he didn't take his medication, if he didn't go to therapy, if he didn't do all that he's not going to function in society. And what happened? A judge enabled his behavior. She let him out of jail before. He had a rap sheet. He was also bailed out before for stuff like, acting out, not taking his meds, whatnot, misusing services, which is pretty serious still. And again, was always downplayed in the name of, CRT, DEI, all that nonsense. So this gentleman is now out in society, commits this heinous crime, and murders someone. And what's done? Slap on the wrist as usual. You have media blaming it on the mental illness. Notice how in this case that they're attacking the gun, but in this case, they're not attacking the offender who is clearly in the wrong. The state does not allow people to be involuntarily hospitalized like they used to. They just enable. And also, they are not blaming the knife, which it was a semi-automatic knife. And then we go to the fact that this person, right, he is a really violent thug. He's doing this, and every single bystander is just thinking it's funny. No joke. You have some of the disgusting comments online that are promoting this and thinking it's funny. And then you have, people in the car just looking there. Oh, some white lady's getting stabbed. So what? We can't control it. And I get to a point that, as a private citizen, you don't want to risk getting stabbed, this and that, which is understandable. Why not call 911? Why didn't anyone take out their phone and dial the emergency number? That would have been the right thing to do. And more importantly, this person who had schizophrenia that did this crime, why was he not taken off the street before, put up in a hospital or something, and said, look, you were given the chance to do the right thing and take your medication because you need it. You're not conducting yourself properly, and you need to be committed until you can learn that. And if they're going to try to go for an insanity defense, the people that are bringing charges against this person, if it's a state, because I know this young woman was a refugee, right? She came over here to find a better life. And the ironic part, from what it looks like, it seems like she might have been bought into the BLM movement, and look what ended up happening to her. This is something that we've warned people about. This has happened before in 2020. You had people that were saying, oh, I'm a social justice warrior, only to have been attacked by the very same group that was claiming to be oppressed. And what's really mind-boggling is how people just let this go on the media, like CNN. CNN just kind of swept it under the rug. They tried to blame the mental illness. They did everything they could to not talk about the offender, the demographic crime, or any of that. And a politician in Charlotte is completely ignoring this 100% and trying to downgrade it. We've had an incident in Chicago this year where the elected officials in Chicago were victim blaming. They were saying, oh, the victim brought it upon themselves when they really didn't, and thinking it was a joke. But because of people being afraid of being called racist, they are not calling out people that are spewing this garbage. Great to see you, Scott. Scott Bivens says, rest in peace, Charlie Kirk, gone but not forgotten, brother. Amen. And what's really disgusting is we have teachers that are social justice warriors, trannies that are saying, oh, this is great. He was a hateful person, blah, blah, blah. Charlie Kirk was not hateful at all. Charlie Kirk believed in free speech. That was the whole message of his platform. And before people accuse us of saying, oh, you like Charlie Kirk and you're worshiping him, let me tell you something. Just like Candace Owens, just like Trump, just like Charlie Kirk, there were points where I disagreed with them respectfully. I don't think you're ever going to find anyone that you agree 100% with. The only person I worship, and we worship here at MAD, is Jesus Christ himself. Charlie Kirk did the best he could to be an honest Christian. He worshiped family. He was clean. He did all these great Christian things that were wholesome, and people hated him for that. But yet the same people that are hating Charlie Kirk promote people that are thug-like and awful and just vulgar, and they call that culture, or they call that something to be admirable of. No. Why was Charlie Kirk a problem when he never had hate speech? And not to mention this, y'all, all speech is free speech, and this is what we need to start getting back to. This was Charlie Kirk's point when he did these phenomenal tours, and he went around the country, and he went around educating people on why free speech is important. And he was not afraid to have civil dialogue. I can't tell you how often you try to either, forward your colors or go out there with a viewpoint and you are shamed for it. You are ridiculed. You have people in your face screaming. When Frankie and I went to Morristown on our event for Confederate Flag Day, we were out there in front of George Washington, not only handing out literature, but educating people and just sticking up for our First Amendment right to be able to wave our flags and be proud of our ancestors and our heritage and our culture. We were hated on so bad by some liberals that got this close in our face, threatened us. And you know what? If it wasn't for these people that spoke up, some of these early speakers. Now, I grew up reading Southern Partisan magazine and adoring some of those authors that wrote these wonderful articles in there. And then getting to take courses with Mr. Clyde Wilson, Brian McClanahan, they inspired me to speak up. Everyone's different. Me personally, I was not inspired by Candace Owens or any of them to go out there. I was already doing that before I knew who they were. When I found out who they were, of course I listened. I thought it was great. I had a little podcast thing. I'd listen to Brian McClanahan, Candace Owens, Charlie Kirk, and Turning Point USA. There was a lot of things I did not agree on certain, all the platforms minus Brian McClanahan. I've agreed with him pretty much as close as possible to 100%. But the minor disagreements, I'd respectfully voice my opinion and say, here's my stance, here's my evidence, versus some of these radical Marxists that get up in your face and scream at you. I mean, if you disagree with someone, you talk like a human being. And that's what I loved about Charlie Kirk is he didn't cuss back. He didn't argue back. he kept it civil. Caitlin Bennett is another great one. She goes out there. She has those tough conversations. And what's really scary now is it's gotten so deadly that just for voicing your First Amendment right, that can get you injured, harmed, or possibly killed. And that shouldn't even be like that. And of course, what's happening now, and again, I'm not completely picking on the left here 100%, on the right, the Republicans. Just today in New Jersey, how disgusting is this? We had two people, one of them was Louder, who was promoting Jack Ciattarelli running by promoting the tragedy of Charlie Kirk. I said, that is so messed up, y'all. Because let's be real, Jack Ciattarelli has supported the NAACP. Let's pull up an article. When Charlie Kirk did his tour, the NAACP this year decided to release a very nasty statement, more or less attacking Charlie Kirk and his character. So if we're going to be real here, if Jack wants to win, actually win votes of people that supported Charlie Kirk and free speech and all that, he right now needs to apologize for supporting the NAACP and denounce them for what they are. The NAACP is a Marxist organization. There is no oppression. All of that BS is a bunch of baloney. They thrive off the oppression narrative. That's the problem, y'all. If they can keep up this oppression narrative, then they have a standing ground where the left is going to keep doing what they're doing, the Marxists, and the right is going to be too afraid to call out the NAACP because, oh no, we're racist, right? We're the party of Lincoln. We can't risk that. This is how we ended up in this mess. So I'm going to read to y'all what the NAACP said. So it says right here in the article, he's going to go to Florida State University, and it's already causing backlash. The FSU chapter of the National Association of Complaining People, let's call them what they are, NAACP, released a statement Tuesday ahead of the MAGA Stars America's Comeback Tour visit at noon Friday on Landis Green, where it calls FSU out for having a history of, quote, elevating controversial speakers while cracking down on progressive student activism. Let me tell you something, y'all. Simply wearing a Confederate officer's uniform will get you kicked out of Washington and Lee and certain colleges for, quote, hate speech when that's wrong. However, when you actually have riots on campus, that's called progressivism. Make it make sense, y'all. During Lee Jackson Day, Washington and Lee University used to always have their service in the college. However, free speech is banned there, and they would rather promote pole dancing. Guess what, y'all? If you're going to allow pole dancing, you got to allow the other. Why would having a speaker that's, quote, controversial be considered a problem and should not be allowed according to the left? But having riots on campus, students tearing things up, screaming at people, that's somehow allowed? The National Association of Complaining People goes on to claim that Kirk had a history of, quote, racist, homophobic, transphobic stances. That right there is a problem, and they claim that he stood against diversity, equity, inclusion. Let's be real, y'all. If there's true inclusion, you would include Charlie Kirk, Candace Owens, Caitlin Bennett, all of that, and us. If you're going to be inclusive, you need to include all of it or none of it. You cannot be inclusive and say we're going to be selective. So instead of colleges being a beacon where everyone's voice is welcome, it's rather would have Marxism on campus than have anyone who would challenge that belief. What happened today was not just a shame, because it's beyond a shame. It is a tragedy, and it was made possible by radical professors, Marxism in America, and the failure to act the last administration for 4 years. And even before that, states failing to say, okay, something's getting out of hand here. The attack on history, it all started with that. The attack on heritage, the attack on Christianity, the attack on churches, calling churches colonizers. This has been allowed to fall like a domino effect, and it has reached a pace that is really scary right now. What do y'all think can be done? If any of y'all watching, comment down below. Because what I'm really seeing with all of this occurring is that people are ready to respectfully stand up. People are tired of staying quiet, y'all. I'm going to be honest, right? When we were doing Monuments Across Dixie on Facebook before we got censored, We gotten harassed. We've gotten attacked. All of this is stuff that was threatening. Now, I'm going to be honest, y'all, and I've done it before. I've gotten harassing stuff. I report it to the police. Document it. This should not be allowed to happen. I see people I agree with all the time on X and all that, but guess what? I will never stoop as low as they will to cuss at them, to shame them like they have other people, to put out personal information, to do anything that would compromise safety, because that's illegal and that's wrong. There needs to be accountability. And I'm hoping that this case is actually going to wake people up, because I've known a lot of people that agree with me, support our history. They didn't know really how to vote, and they're not going to vote for the right or left, but they're going to speak out against the left for being bad. Why the heck are you guys condoning this kind of behavior? You know, you have people like Maxine Waters that have gone out there and encouraged riots when they happened in the quote, mostly peaceful summer of love in the 1920s. But we don't have anything from them denouncing what happened now, only because they're, quote, forced to or feel forced to. And even then, the few that have said anything about it have given this much compassion. What's even more scary is that people like to make a conspiracy theory out of just about everything. And look, there's certain things I believe that's considered conspiracy, but then there's these actual conspiracy theories that are not grounded in anything. And that to me is just absolutely appalling. I've seen crazy people, crazy Marxists on TikTok celebrating what happened today. That's disgusting, y'all. Absolutely disgusting. What happened today was that you had a Christian husband, father, who was explaining his viewpoint at a college campus, not being afraid to offend people, not being afraid to, call out what's wrong today, what's going on, and give his viewpoint and evidence, and even hear those who disagree with him and have that dialogue respectfully. Ask those tough questions. Instead, what we're now dealing with is people that are really showing their true colors online, that are saying things like, racism is gone today, or a racist passed on. Notice how racism no longer has any meaning anymore. It's something that's a dead term. It's something that people like to harp on and like to, say it because it makes them feel powerful. But I'm going to be honest, y'all. If you're afraid of doing something for fear of being called racist, you are the problem. Speak your mind, get your viewpoint out there, and you should not be afraid of repercussions. That is the First Amendment, to be able to give a viewpoint that might be different or controversial. Likewise, and let's not also twist words here, guns are not the problem here, right? We have a Second Amendment for a reason, and yet that is under attack, just like the First Amendment is. And of course, the Marxists are looking at a way of, let's make this about the guns. No. There is something very fishy here about this case, and I'm interested to see what happened when they catch the person who did this. It was professionally done, and that's the scary thing. Do other speakers have to worry? How come the college didn't do their due diligence and prep for a speaker coming that they knew might have been controversial? I know for a fact other speakers, there's a lot of security, there's stuff in place, there's protocols in there. Somebody dropped the ball here big time. The gun is not the problem, y'all. The problem here, and in both these cases, one case, in the case of Iryna Zarutska, is going to be mental illness and a person that should have been hospitalized, not enabled by being bailed out. So why is it that in that case they're blaming the gun when in reality, or rather not the gun, blaming the gun in Charlie Kirk's case, in the case of Iryna, they're downplaying the situation because of mental illness. Mental illness played a role. The person knew what he was doing. Why aren't they blaming, that, or, the mayor in that town of Charlotte, the politicians in Charlotte who have done nothing to stop it? Yet you look at how Marxist Charlotte's become. They've destroyed their history. They've destroyed memorials. Nothing's better in Charlotte. Charlotte's more dangerous now than it was in the past when we had our heritage there. In the case of Charlie Kirk, it is not the gun that's the problem, y'all. The problem is the fact that a Marxist was allowed to do this, that there was no protocol in place, that people didn't scope things out. So that's all there is for tonight, y'all. I figured we would end with a brief moment of silence to honor both Charlie Kirk and Iryna. as well as the families that were impacted by 9/11 today, because it is officially 9/11. And while we're on that subject, y'all, I pray for everyone who has been impacted by 9/11. I've known people that have lost siblings, parents, loved ones, and it's a fight to maintain the 9/11 memorial site. Everyone in New York, the elected officials don't care about our memorials. The 9/11 memorial is a historically significant memorial. And given everything that's going on in the country and in some of these, communist cities, with Zohan Mamdani, you would think that New York would know better after how bad 9/11 was. And unfortunately, it seems like people have forgotten or just moved away. I've known a lot of people that lived in the city that have long gone because of how bad it's gotten. The city is no longer New York anymore. It's no longer the city of opportunity. It's a city of socialism, iconoclasm, and cultural Marxism. And I pray that in the future that we all continue to lead the good fight. What happened today, I'm going to channel my anger into activism by promising myself to not only be stronger as a Christian, to continue praying for those we've lost, to also go out there and spread the cause, our Christian cause, our Southern cause, and honor everyone's ancestors, those that are no longer here with us, our ancestors, and honor patriots like Charlie Kirk and Iryna. All right, y'all. God bless each and every one of you. God bless Dixie. Long live the South. And Deo Vindice, y'all.